Good evening, folks. Welcome back to another Monday night live stream. How is everybody? I hope you all had a good weekend. Apologies for the short notice of cancelling last week. Something come up. However, we're back this week, and it means that you'll all have loads to talk about because we've not spoke for a couple of weeks. So we've got a bit of a lively chat already tonight. Quite a bit of chat going on from about 8 o'clock, I think it was. Yeah, plenty of people in the chat tonight. So let's say hello to a few faces. We had Paul Palms was first one in tonight. Good evening, Paul. How are you doing? Phil Wilkinson was followed in there as well quite soon after. Nice to see you, Phil. Hope you're doing well, mate. Then who do we have? We then had Top Table Gaming coming in as well. Evening, buddy, if you're still around. Then let's have a look. There was a bit of chat going on. Furious George came in as well. Good evening, George. How are you doing? Steve Evans came in as well. Steve Evans is on the cider tonight. Evening, buddy. Christian Reeves in as well. Good evening, Christian. Where are we at? VJ's in as well. I said morning, folks. Morning to VJ. Where else we got? We got Different Gear TV in. Good evening, buddy. What's your name, mate? I feel bad keep calling you Different Gear TV. I need to know what your name is. We've also got Flying Mammals coming as well. Good evening, Ruth. Is it the All Valley Trophy for the Karate Kid thing? It looked fantastic. Nice bit of work you've been doing there for your cosplay stuff. Baz is in as well. Good evening, Bazza. How are you, mate? Furious George says the rise of fantasy. How about the fall of Bretonia? I miss those guys. I was never into fantasy, like sort of Warhammer fantasy. I never ever played it, so I've got a little bit of a kind of a different feel about it as opposed to a lot of people. But yeah, so for those that haven't seen it, tonight's topic is the rise of fantasy, and I think there's a bit more to it as well than just the fact that, you know, Game of Thrones is popular and that kind of stuff. I've got a few more thoughts about it and I want to talk about them as well, but we will be talking about all the different fantasy games that are out there, all the new ones that's coming along. So if we go right back through, we've got obviously Age of Sigmar, Kings of War Vanguard, we've got Warlords of Erewhon, we've got Song of Ice and Fire, we've got Conquest by Parabellum's a new game that's just been launched, we've got Warcry obviously coming out soon as well, Frostgrave. What have I missed? There's hundreds at the minute. There are so many. I'm sure I've missed a load out. We'll get onto them in the chat. So make sure you let me know the ones that you enjoy, why you play them, why you play that one over something else, what's special about it. And then once we get into it a little bit, I'll start a chat about why I think it's on the rise at the minute. I think there's one point we might not have thought about why it's on the rise, and we'll come on to that in a bit. So we've got Lee in as well, scouting the web. Evening, buddy. How are you? Phil says, I win. My cup should be in the post. Phil said to me in the chat earlier on, if I can guess what colour t-shirt you're wearing, do I win a mug? And I said, yes, you can. You get 2 guesses. And at the time, I didn't have a shirt on at all. It is roasting here. I'm probably going to be melting halfway through this show. So yeah, he didn't get it right, but I did have to put a shirt on, obviously, for the live stream. So no, Phil, that doesn't count. We've got Mark Bericlov in as well. Good evening, Mark. How are you, mate? Paul's in as well. Evening to Paul. VJ saying green tea really does taste better out of a Bugman's mug. Tonight, I've just gone for the water tonight, but it is in a glass there that I got from my sons for Father's Day, which says, magnificent dad is terrific, charming, wonderful, exceptional, and splendid. So yes, mug watch tonight is on water. So yes, that'll keep me a bit cooler, I think, and keep my throat lubricated a bit. Who else we got in? We've got Jez Hunt in. Good evening, Jez. He said he's doodling Viking helmets at the moment. Is that for something particular? Oh yeah, just doodling, mate. Skullmunch is in, says evening all. Evening, buddy. How you doing, Sean? Mountain is in as well. Says evening, BlackJackers. Hashtag Romantic Monday. I forget now what you were painting, mate. I'm trying to think back when I saw your picture. I can't remember what it was, but whatever it was, looked awesome. We've got Craig in as well. He says, how's it going? Currently painting up Rumble Slam team. Nice one, Craig. I really like the quality of the resins for Rumble Slam. They just seem really, really smooth. I've not really seen that kind of smooth miniature before. Rumble Slam ones really do seem to be good quality. where we're at. Paul saying, what's Game of Thrones? I'm so far behind, mate. I'm not one to talk about it either. We got Darren in as well. Says, hail and well met, old son. Good evening, gentlemen. Yeah, gentlemen. Good evening, sir. I should have said. How are you doing, mate? Yep, Furious George is saying, don't forget Lord of the Rings. I knew I'd forget something, mate. Different gear says he's called Chris. Although I've been called Buse from my surname, Busey. That's right, mate. I remember from Instagram now. So, Busey it is, mate. Or Buse, we'll call you. Buse, I must remember that now. Got to try and tuck it away there. How will I remember it? Buse. Okay, I'll try and remember it. Jez says, we can all thank Tolkien and those Gen Con nerds for hanging out with Gygax. You're not wrong, mate. I mean, how much of the kind of the influence really is like Dungeons and Dragons was obviously a huge influence on Games Workshop. They were the first company in the UK to stock it. They got the license to distribute it in the UK, which is obviously kind of part of their success story in the past. But yeah, Dungeons and Dragons and Tolkien really, I suppose, is quite a lot to answer for. Busey 9mm, that's how I remember it now, mate. Paul saying, Wrath of Kings is my favourite, that never got going. Also like Confrontation. Confrontation was the old one from Rackham, wasn't it? Do I remember right that did they have pre-painted miniatures? Or have I remembered that wrong? Darren says he's painting Song of Ice and Fire Lannister Cavalry as I listen along. Nice one, mate. So Fantasy it is for you tonight too. Flying Mammal says, thanks about the trophy. It looked awesome. I am always amazed how good your cosplay stuff looks. It's one thing when you try to make something that's kind of like an inch high, you can get away with a lot of mistakes, but when you're building something that's like this tall, you've got to put a detail in there. It absolutely nailed it. It looked awesome. Jez is saying, been sorting stuff for Rangers of Shadow Deep. There's another game as well. Great looking stuff. He says, hashtag Mug Watches back. Certainly is. Paul's been indoors listening to podcasts about murderers. Glad you're over in Spain, mate. I'd be getting a little bit worried if you were closer. Matt was the Alpha Simeon for Dreadball. That's what it was. I remember now. I couldn't remember what it was. Andy Smith's in as well. He says, now then, how are we doing? I'm not doing too bad, Andy Smith. Thanks very much, mate. Yeah, Busey there saying it hit about 34 degrees, about 36 on Sunday. It's really warm outside. I've done a bit of a barbecue, some nice sort of roasted salmon and roasted veg on the barbecue, and sat outside with my wife before I came on stream tonight. It's just so nice, and then you come inside and it's like an oven indoors. I did have a fan on, and I was checking. I've got a little fan over there, and I was checking to see what the feedback was on this other thing. It's just a little bit too noisy. I think it would have got annoying, like an hour and a half of that fan running away, so you'll have to just see me become a shiny, sweaty mess as the night goes on. Tony's in as well. Good evening, all he says. Good evening, mate. Skullmunch says, my mug has hashtag mugwatch on it. Of course it does, mate. Now it's arrived anyway. Phil says, will you be getting a Warcry, bruv? I've mentioned very briefly in the when we were chatting earlier on, I'm not honestly 100% sure. The models look lovely, the terrain looks nice. I like Kill Team, but I want to know what it plays like first. I don't want it to be one of them games that I kind of play a couple of times and then never play again. And I want to see what the gameplay is like. I almost want to see what they do with it. I don't want to end up just chasing it like Kill Team was a little bit. So who knows, mate? I'm leaning towards it purely from a content point of view, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm not 100% sure my heart's in it yet. I need to hear more about it, mate. Bruce said we're all jealous. Craig says the minis are very good quality, minimal flash and mold lines. Really enjoyed painting them. Nice one, mate. Ghost Ace, good evening, Ghost Ace. How are you doing? He says Rackham moved to pre-painted but had metal in their first waves. Yeah, I thought I remembered them being pre-painted as well. Paul says Confrontation models back in the noughties were some of the best metal models out there. Yeah, I think I remember them just. I don't know if I remember them more from people talking about them than I do from actually sort of being around at the time. Tony's going to be painting a couple of blacksmiths for Guild Ball tournament. Nice, mate. Is it Leodis? Is it? I think I've got the name right there. Is that in their new place now, mate? Is it looking pretty nice in the pictures? Phil says, save me a burger. We've got Phil Johnson in as well. Good evening, Phil. He says, I think AOS is important in the fantasy resurgence. First big popular game that was fantasy without being rank and flank. Sci-fi and modern was so popular for ages because it moved away from rank and flank. That's an interesting concept, actually, that. What do people think about that? Do you think that rank and flank, do you think people just got a bit sick of rank and flank fantasy games? And is that one of the reasons why it kind of had a bit of a lull period? Or do you think that when fantasy was killed off by Games Workshop, people kind of left and went looking elsewhere? There was definitely a period of time when I used to play War Machine. There was a big part of the War Machine community were ex kind of fantasy players, ex Warhammer fantasy players, and they all got a bit sick of it around 6th edition, I think it was, and they all left and went looking for a different game. And at the time, War Machine was very competitive, and that was what they enjoyed about fantasy. They enjoyed the tournaments and stuff. So I think some people kind of moved away from fantasy and then came back a little bit later on. But I've got a kind of a bit of a theory why I think there are so many fantasy games at the moment. But we'll come on to that one anyway. Otherwise, if I say it now, we'll be able to talk about it for the next hour and a half. Marco's in as well. Good evening, Marco. He says, sorry he's late. It was setting things up to paint Hellboy. There was a Game of Thrones advertisement when connecting to your live show, very fitting with the topic. Certainly was, mate. Paul says, salmon on the barbecue up north, you'll get burnt at a witch. You're not wrong, mate. Should have just been like dirty burger, shouldn't it? That's what it would have been. Craig says, when my house is hot, I leave the loft door open. All the heat rises out, leaving it a lot cooler. This is just like, it just heats up. I've had the blind closed for a while and the window open, just trying to get some airflow in. But when you're sitting in here, obviously the PC's running away, kicking out heat. I've got monitors on, I've got lights on. It all just kind of builds up over time. So it's not too bad at the moment, but as the night goes on, you'll see the face starting to go more and more red. That's for sure. Where are we at as well? Matt's saying no Warcry for him. Needs to stick a plan, determined to do it. I like your plan, mate. And I've been thinking I need to have a bit of a clear out and maybe narrow down on some of the things that I play, just to try and put a bit more effort into them, really. I feel like I've become a bit more of a magpie than normal at the minute, so I need to kind of narrow it down a bit. Tim's in as well, says, hello, Andy, and greetings from the Premier Inn in Cleethorpes. Good evening, buddy. I hope your Wi-Fi is holding up okay for you. We've got Andra in as well, says, hello from the Czech Republic. Great job, Andy. Thank you very much. I hope I pronounced your name correctly there, Andra. Thank you very much for joining the live stream. But nice to have you on board. Phil saying the law is important. We might touch on that actually as the night goes on as well, about the law, because the law in fantasy feels like it's more important to people, more important to players, more important to kind of to the hobbyists than it is in sci-fi. Would you agree with that statement or not? Is it more about the law when it comes to fantasy? Are fantasy gamers more driven by the law, if you like? Let's have a look. VJ saying, going to pop over to the Agents of Sigmar Gents live stream back in a bit. How very dare you? Paul says, Night Vault got me tempted to buy Soul Wars. Yeah, the Night Vault are nice, mind. Sean said he loved the look of rank and file troops on the battlefield, but I hate painting them all. They do look great when they're all done, man. I must admit, when I went to the Clash of Kings tournament in Manchester last year, and I saw some fantastic armies. I mean, there's obviously, because of the multi-basing with Kings of War, of which I've been doing a little bit more tonight there. You probably won't be able to see them on the screen there, but a bit of multi-basing being going on there for my abyssals. Because you can do that multi-basing, you don't necessarily have to rank them up how you would used to do it in fantasy. However, there was one particular army that always stands out to me was Rusty Shackleford's army, if anybody knows who Rusty is. He had a dwarf army that had a yellow theme, and I just absolutely loved it. It was proper rank and flank, like lines, ranks of troops, all side by side, on no minimal model count stuff for him. And it all together ranked up and like on the field, it just looked fantastic. He's a good painter as well, so there's obviously there's that as well, but it just that's the one that kind of stood out to me. And it was obviously Paul Welsh, fantastic painter as well. He'd done his Varangur. That was like just like a hobby dream, really. The stuff he'd done with that, putting in the LEDs and all that kind of stuff, that really kind of inspired me from a hobby perspective. But just the army that Rusty had done kind of made me want to get into Kings of War at that point. And I've kind of hummed and hawed and toyed with the idea. What I'm trying to do this time is I'm trying to do it as quickly as I can to get an army on the table and to show you folks that you don't have to kind of commit like 18 months to putting an army together, that there are shortcuts you can take and it'll still look good. So what I'm trying to do this time is, and I'll lift that off, I'm using some rocks obviously here for the army, and I'm actually gluing the models to the rocks and I'm going to paint them in place. Because that way, the way I figure it is, I'll prime them kind of one colour. I'll be able to come in with either an airbrush or a spray can and put a bit of a highlight into it as well. And then I'll pick some bits out on the faces and the weapons and stuff as well. But if my brush can't touch it, my eye ain't really going to see it. So I'm trying to kind of to do it a lot quicker that way, I think. But we'll see how it goes. We'll go back a little bit now, see where we're up to. Ghost is saying rank and flank's great for historical, but skirmish formation is the way to go. Certainly, skirmish seems to be pushing all the buttons at the minute, doesn't it? Phil saying he likes the idea of rank and flank. George says, what about the original fantasy battle? Chess, kings, queen, castles and horses. You're not wrong, mate. I suppose that really does get overlooked when it comes to tabletop gaming. Flip Movie Makers in says, good evening. Good evening to you. Hope you're well, and thank you for joining the live chat tonight. Tony says, Leodis has just moved to a bigger place, can host bigger events. Nice place to hang out. I was looking at the photographs online. It really does look like a nice place, actually. You're a lucky guy to have kind of like a nice place like that locally. So yeah, nice one. I'll have to try and pop it at some point. Steve says, always loved rank and flank. When I got bored of Warhammer, I moved to historicals, then found Kings of War, which you probably know by now I love. Yes, well, I remember. So Steve has a poll up at the moment in the BlackJack Legacy Facebook group. And I should have prepped it and had it on the screen, but I might have to get it on my laptop here. And he's choosing between he's asking you lot to choose between 3 different factions for Kings of War. And the one you choose will be the one that I face in Kings of War at the Top Table Legacy Weekender in October. So we'll check in on that about 10 o'clock. Remind me on, Steve, if I get sidetracked, I don't see the time, mate. But yeah, we'll see how that one is going. Jez is in to Furious George. It'll be... I'm not even going to try and pronounce that, mate. We've got Animus Oculus in, says, hey there, love the Warcry is going to have small unit cards with easy and quick info like every other skirmish game. I quite like the cards, I'll be honest. I've had a look at them tonight on the Warhammer community page, and it does look interesting, but I need to see how it plays. I don't want it to be kind of overly convoluted and complicated and loads of stuff to track. That would kind of, I think that would maybe sort of take it out for me, I think. Douglas is in as well. Good evening, buddy. He says he's starving, but he's here. I'm honoured that you've passed over on some food for a little while, mate. Really am. Tony's saying the board will be curated, the library will be curated by him, be holding all-day board game events. I'm going to have to try and get down for one of them, mate. That might be pretty cool. Marco's saying, are we saying that fantasy stories are made up? Dragons never existed. They might not have existed in your part of the world, mate, but I tell you what, I've seen some dragons around here in the northeast, that's for sure. Steve's in as well from Steve's Small World. He says, just nipping in as he's shattered from work. Well, thank you for dropping in, buddy. Much appreciated. George is saying, of course, dragons existed. Phil says, all of Warhammer players obviously like rank and flank, but back in the day, Space Marines outsold the entire fantasy battle small fry. Yeah. And he said it's won new players rather than winning back the old ones. I think it's interesting because I think maybe fantasy battles had... If you think about it back then, when fantasy was on a bit of a decline, there wasn't a lot of fantasy games around. Now there are lots, and like I say, I've kind of got one theory why I think we're seeing a lot more of them now as well. Darren says, one of the benefits of fantasy is you can either soak up the lore or go for something like Dragon Rampant, which is lore neutral. To be fair, you can go to any game and ignore the lore, really. I'm not a big kind of reader of lore of games and stuff. For me, it's more about, do I like the models and do I enjoy playing the game? The lore is very much kind of secondary for me. But I know for a lot of people, the lore is massively important. Tony is saying, always love fantasy. Probably started at school with loving the Arthurian legends, then Tolkien and McCaffrey. Like I say, I've never really been a fantasy player until maybe the last 12 months. Vanguard was definitely the one that kind of tipped me over into more fantasy gaming. Beauty there saying his Mantic Walking Dead all-out war delivery arrived last Thursday. Tried playing the tutorials, seems pretty good. Yeah, once you get your head around it, mate, it's not too difficult, but there's things that'll crop up as you play it and stuff, but the rules are all there, so yeah, you'll enjoy it. Phil says, when's your birthday? A random question. My birthday is November, mate, so yeah, end of November. So I will be 44 this year, so yeah, so a little while off, buddy. do you want my PIN number as well for the bank? I just thought that might have been some kind of like steal my identity thing. Paul saying the YouTube vid seems to suggest Warcry is fast paced and easy to pick up. I think it has to be because the rules feel like very different from AOS. Because from what I remember looking at them is there doesn't seem to be a lot of ranged weapons. So I think it's going to be very much kind of close combat fighting. There seems to be, like, models have like 15 wounds. So it's not kind of one big hit and they're gone. So that'll keep it interesting. So I think it'll be quick, but it's not like one shot and gone. So that'll be interesting. And I hope they don't kind of take the kill team route of those injury rules and stuff like that. That's a bit convoluted. I think it's one thing that doesn't really need to be there. I think what they'll have done is they'll have taken that away and just given them more wounds to keep them in the game a bit longer. So yeah, we'll see soon enough. Pre-orders go out this Saturday. If anybody is ordering from Element Games, don't forget to click the affiliate link down below in the description of every single video. There's one in the Facebook group as well. That just helps me out and you get a discount from Element as well. And of course, it's the Warhammer Open Day this Saturday. Loads of people going, so they'll be getting a chance to play it for the first time. So no doubt by kind of Saturday, Sunday, we'll start to get some information back. We'll probably see somebody like Guerrilla Miniature Games. They'll get an early copy of it, and he'll have some videos up ready to go. So yeah, no doubt by Saturday night or Sunday, we'll know a lot more about it. Where are we at? Skullmuncher saying, same as Phil, used to have a wood elf army. Phil saying he misses the elf archers. Douglas says, I never played AOS. How does it compare to other fantasy games? Is it the gold standard? Is Vanguard? I played AOS for quite a while back, sort of around the time the General's Handbook came out, the first one. And I really enjoyed it. But it became a bit like convoluted, really. The core rules are pretty basic, but then there are so many rules laid on top of it from all of the different armies, and armies have completely different things that they do that unless you know about that army, they're not relevant for anything else. So if you're playing more seriously, you need to know all that kind of stuff. And then when General's Handbook 2017 or 2018 came around, a lot of the battle plans changed it, and they tried to kind of almost introduce hordes and bigger armies into the game. And I had a Beastclaw Raiders army, which were relatively low model count. I couldn't really win some of the scenarios because I think I had less than 20 models in my army because there was big kind of the big mammoths type stuff. And a lot of these battle plans and stuff have 20 models like sort of to control the scenario or to control the objective. So I kind of drifted away from it. And from what I understand now, it's become a bit more convoluted, really. There's rules all over the place, especially with Soul Wars and stuff coming out. So I'm speaking secondhand from kind of what I'm hearing from other people. I've not played it in a long time, but I wouldn't say it's the gold standard. I think you could even like 40k, for example. I wouldn't say it's the gold standard in sort of sci-fi gaming. It's the biggest one, and AOS is potentially the biggest fantasy game. But I think within fantasy, there's a lot more options. And I wouldn't say one was really the be-all and end-all. I really enjoy Vanguard. I like Kings of War, what I know about it so far. But I'm sure things like Song of Ice and Fire are great. I'm sure things like, I can't even think now. Like, loads of people love their Middle-earth strategy battle games. I couldn't really get away with it, but I am going to keep plugging away at it. So I don't really think there's any such a thing as the gold standard, if I'm honest. Let's have a look where we're up to. Top Table Gaming says, I love fantasy games, always been my main genre of gaming. It's rare I'll dabble in sci-fi, but also love some post-apocalyptic stuff. That's got to be Jay there then. if it was Steve, we'd definitely have a bit of 40k, and it would just be Middle Earth and 40k, I think. Glenn's in as well. Good evening, Glenn. How are you doing? Marco says, what's your middle name, your mum's maiden name, and your national insurance number? George says, are you old enough to remember the moral panic about D&D and Satanism? I am. Well, I don't think I necessarily remember it firsthand. Obviously, I know more about it kind of looking back at it now with the information we've got. But I've never ever played Dungeons and Dragons. So it was something that kind of probably passed me by back then. And around that time, I was like, what's that, like in the 80s? I was more into sports and stuff then, really. I wasn't really into tabletop gaming back then. So yeah, a lot of the kind of, for all I'm older than a lot of you lot, I'm a much newer kind of like sort of to the hobby really. So yeah, I'm aware of it, and I was around then, but I wasn't gaming at the time. Phil says, I got the haircut and beard. I just need the name of your childhood pet and I'm done. Where are we at? Nick Yellen says, hello again, Andy. Did you enjoy the Dread Bowl? Good evening, Nick, first of all. I watched a little bit of it, mate. I think I came in late, and I was just kind of sitting watching it on my phone while the little one was watching these sort of bedtime stories before he went off to bed. We let him watch a little bit of kind of sort of CBeebies children's hour at the end of the day. So he was kind of watching that, and I had my phone on quiet. So I watched a little bit of it, but it was difficult to see on my phone, and I couldn't really hear very well. But yeah, Dread Bowl's a good game. I need to play more Dread Bowl. Phil says, Dread Bowl sounds cool. Douglas is saying, convoluted seems to be kill team now. At first I was excited, so a big concern. I'm with you, mate. That's exactly my concerns, really. I loved Kill Team when I first started playing it, and it just became to the point where it wasn't easy just to kind of settle on this is what Kill Team is. Everybody was playing slightly different versions of it, and that kind of a bit of a fly in the ointment for me, I think. Glenn's just saying there, yeah, have you ever played D&D? No, mate. I've never played a role-playing game, ever. I've never done any sort of RPG stuff. I wouldn't even know where to start. Steve from Steve Small World did try to get me involved in a D&D, like an online campaign thing. And I just, he set me a character up and everything, and I couldn't make the times. There was a couple of things. I think the first time my little one wasn't very well or something, and it just clashed. Saturday nights wasn't my best night, but so maybe one day. Paul saying, the only thing I know is Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, mate, that's me as well. The cartoon, sorry. Claudio's in as well. He says, unfortunately, I got to go, but we'll catch up. So hi and bye. Thanks for dropping in, Claudio, if you watch this back. Skullmunch says, top 3 fantasy games. I'll have a think while you answer. Top 3, definitely Vanguard is in there. It's the game that kind of got me back into fantasy, or into fantasy even, really. Although I had played a little bit of AOS and lost. It's funny, I don't really feel like AOS is fantasy when I played it. For all it obviously is, but... so, yeah, definitely Vanguard's in there. I'm not really sure I've played that many more fantasy games, if I'm honest, mate. I've obviously played a little bit of Middle Earth, but I'm still kind of getting my head around that. Yeah, I'll have to just stick. I haven't played Kings of War yet, like sort of full skill, not to the point where I could say it was in my top 3. But yeah, I'll have to go with Vanguard in a minute, mate. We got Johnny Jambo Jambo in, says, evening Andy and the fellow Blackjack Legacy. Is still like that name, mate. Douglas said he's 54 and the D&D scare made me sell original books from 1980. Greatest regret. Now I'm a priest who's playing D&D weekly. I saw your picture, mate, on Facebook today. I think it was either today or yesterday, with your monster manual and the player's handbook and stuff. And I thought that kind of juxtaposition of the collar and the D&D books was quite funny, mate. It was good to see. Where are we at? Paul saying, nice to see you in the chat, Father. Jay's saying there, Song of Ice and Fire, Vanguard and Middle Earth. Never played Frostgrave, Paul. Never played Frostgrave. And Skullmunch there saying, mine might be the same to Jay. So let's have a little bit of a chat then. So, yeah, one of the reasons, so we're definitely seeing a resurgence of fantasy, I think, over the last few years. Like I say, we've got, say how many I can kind of reel off the top of my head now. So Frostgrave kind of made a bit of a dent a little while ago. So Frostgrave's been bubbling away in the background. We then have Kings of War is obviously gathering momentum now as well, since Fantasy went the way of the dodo, and Kings of War definitely capitalised on that rank and flank thing. AOS then obviously had a bit more of a resurgence once they started to get some points in there. Kings of War Vanguard coming last year really does seem to have made a bit of a splash and an impression. Middle Earth coming back as well. Obviously that community never went away, and the fact that they've kind of sort of hung on to that, GW obviously come back and supporting that really well now. So Middle Earth is climbing all the time as well. We've got the Warlords of Erewhon coming from Warlord Games. They've obviously seen that as a bit of a market there as well for fantasy games, and they've gotten on board. We've got Conquest by Parabellum. That's a new game that just came out back end of June, I think it was. Rules are written by Alessio Cavatori. Rank and flank game. Bigger scale miniatures, nearer about maybe 38 to 40 mil scale, I think. And they're a bit bigger as well, so that's coming. We've then got Rangers of Shadow Deep from Joseph McCulloch, who also did Frostgrave rules. We've obviously got Song of Ice and Fire as well, kind of capitalising on the current popularity around Game of Thrones for all the TV shows now finished. But there's a lot of things in there, and then obviously we've now got Warcry coming as well, and that's probably upping the hype again around fantasy. Now, one thing that what I said is I've got a bit of a different idea about it. I think one thing I feel like what's happened is that people have almost given up trying to compete with Games Workshop on 40k. So when it comes to sci-fi games, the market is just so all sort of swallowed up by 40k that if you're going to release a sci-fi game, it's either got to be a skirmish game so that it doesn't compete against kind of 40k, but then even Kill Team came in and seemed to mop up a lot of that skirmish sci-fi stuff last year. Or you've got to do something very different. So Dead Zone, as an example, does something different that neither Kill Team nor 40k does. And it kind of takes it into that three-dimensional cubic kind of area. The movement's different. It really does give you something different for a sci-fi game. Infinity has that kind of that reaction order thing, where it's the tagline being "It's always your turn" kind of thing. Infinity does something a little bit different as well. Fantastic sculpts for all that can be a bit fiddly to put together. Fantastic sculpts. Really nice kind of lore and background as well, if that's important to you. But it does something a little bit different. Outside of there's not a great deal when it comes to sci-fi stuff. Star Wars is in there as well, starting to pick up, but if that didn't have the Star Wars license around it, I wouldn't have thought that would have really picked up much momentum, so it's good that it was Star Wars. You've also got Gates of Antares, not a massive kind of market around that. Warpath from Mantic, not really a huge market around that. I feel like GW have got sci-fi stitched up. But when it comes to fantasy, there's opportunities for people to get in and really kind of put a bit of a stake in the ground. Because AOS, for all it's popular, it's not the be-all and end-all of fantasy gaming. Kings of War has a huge following kind of worldwide now as well. And as I mentioned before, when fantasy disappeared, certainly from an American market, a lot of the American fantasy players sort of adopted Kings of War as their new kind of go-to game. There's a big community in Australia for it as well, for example. I just think there's more opportunity to have a bit of land grab, steal a bit of market share if you have a fantasy game. And certainly when it comes to the new sort of love for skirmish games, there wasn't a lot around. So Vanguard came into the market at just the right time from a fantasy point of view. Frostgrave was always much more kind of RPG end of things, and I think it coincided with things like Game of Thrones being quite popular, and fantasy in general becoming Dungeons and Dragons, the popularity of Dungeons and Dragons coming back again as well. So I think it's just easier for companies to try and grab a little bit of the share of the market with a fantasy game rather than a sci-fi game. So I'd be interested to know what you think about that as an idea. Not read it anywhere, just something that kind of cropped in my mind when I was thinking about this subject. And I just wonder whether that's one of the reasons we're seeing the rise of fantasy at the minute. Fantasy is obviously becoming more popular as a genre, but more companies are jumping onto it because there isn't really a domineering game, I think, when it comes to fantasy. Tim saying Warlords of Erewhon's great. Rick Priestley, original GW writer of fantasy, basically fantasy bolt action with zero fluff or story. As long as you don't want any fluff or story, that's a good thing. Douglas is saying Frostlock Grave is awesome. Johnny there saying fantasy's like crack cocaine. Once played World of Warcraft non-stop for 32 hours. Eventually woke up slumped in my chair as level 32 Orc Fire Mage. It's dangerous. Yeah, I'm also going to say I've played World of Warcraft for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes with one of my sons. But yeah, I've never really been into that kind of grindy game, if I'm honest. George is saying Fantasy Battle 6th edition was my entry point, so always have a soft spot for fantasy. If I remember right, 6th edition was High Elves and Skaven, wasn't it? Was that the edition that was? Douglas is saying he thinks fantasy is more popular because of the resurgence of D&D and fantasy role player. The RPG crew is influencing the tabletop market. I think you're not wrong there, mate. I definitely think that the love of Dungeons and Dragons and all of these famous people and celebrities coming forward saying how much they love it, it's definitely influencing the market, that's for sure. Animus is saying I missed the War of the Ring. It was the only war game with movement trays that I liked. I remember seeing that many years ago, like in GW shops, but I have never seen it played and I've never really heard anybody talk about it. So I'm not 100% sure what the game was like, but it obviously had an audience at some point. Douglas is saying model agnostic games like Frostgrave and Ragnarok are more popular because there are so many fantasy models out there. Not so for sci-fi. There are not a ton of models for non-licensed games. I don't really like sort of miniature agnostic games. I like to get involved in a game. I like to kind of know when I'm playing against somebody exactly what the model is. So, you know, if that's an abyssal dwarf, for example, I know exactly that it's an abyssal dwarf because I've seen it on the internet on the website or whatever. So I actually quite like games that have that kind of sort of model range. It makes it easier for me to plan what I like to buy or what I want to get. When it's so open that you can have whatever you want, I kind of like the hobby aspect of it goes out the window for me, and it's almost that it's so open that I lose a bit of interest, really. I mean, I think that's a really personal thing to me, and I can't imagine many other people share that feeling, but I'm always a bit funny with these rule sets where you can use whatever you want for that reason. Douglas is spotting with Game of Thrones influence. Sean saying, would you say, Sean, that Malifaux is fantasy? I wasn't sure whether I was going to include that when you were talking about top 3, because Malifaux would have been in there, but I'm not sure I'd call it fantasy. I don't really know what I'd call it. Mark saying, fantasy board games, dungeon crawlers are plenty though. Yeah, when it comes to dungeon crawlers, they've dominated the fantasy market, really. You don't get a lot of sci-fi dungeon crawlers, really. Phil says, new competition, guess the name of your dog or cat and get a free mug. I don't have any pets, mate, and I've never really had pets. I'm not really an animal person, if I'm honest. Not for any other reason. It's just like, I never grew up with pets. I never had dogs or cats or anything like that. My family weren't really kind of pet people. I had a budgie when I was a kid. That's about it. Where we at? George is saying 4th was High Elves and Goblins. 6th was Orcs and Humans. Maybe it was 7th, and there was definitely... Was it 7th edition that had the High Elves and the Skaven in it, I think. That's the one I remember. Tony saying, in video games, I'm really looking forward to the new Baldur's Gate. Didn't realise that was a new thing, mate. Didn't realise that was coming. Phil says, if you guess my dog's name, I'll send you a mug. Phil, I wouldn't even know where to start, mate. Is it... I'm just going to go Rover. Steve saying, War of the Rings was a great game, but just didn't take off. Skullmuncher saying, Rupert McWufferson. Flip Movie Maker says, I agree with your feeling regarding miniature agnostic games. Yeah, I wasn't sure it was just kind of me. I always, like, it's a thing that I just, like, people always say, oh, you know, you can play with all the things you've got and stuff, but I think the way my mind works, I like to look at something and know that's what it is. If I look down and then I've got to give it another thought about, yeah, I know it's this, but I'm using it as such and such in this game. it's just an extra level of thought, I think, that I don't want to have. So yeah, I'm funny like that. Paul saying, I like to see more games that are neither sci-fi or fantasy, such as Wild in the Streets. Yeah, I see Malifaux a little bit in that kind of middle ground. Games like War Machine, for all it's steampunk and I suppose it's fantasy, it's a bit more middle ground. Walking Dead is that kind of middle ground. Fallout, for me, is a bit more of a middle ground rather than technically sci-fi, although I suppose it's post-apocalyptic. So there's a few games sitting that middle ground, but we kind of think of things that are either sci-fi or fantasy. I mean, would you class something like Batman Miniatures game? Would you class that as fantasy? It's funny, isn't it? It's where it kind of fits in. Where are we at? Yeah, Skullmunch is saying a similar thing there as well about where does it fit. George is saying Blackstone Fortress is a sci-fi dungeon crawler. Yeah, so are things like Core Space is as well, and also Star Saga by Mantic. But they're more, and I suppose really, would you say Space Hulk is a sci-fi dungeon crawler as well? I think there are a few, but there's a lot more kind of fantasy dungeon. I mean, the fact it's called a dungeon crawler, it shows that it's got its roots in fantasy, I suppose. Yeah, I'm just reading your comments there, Douglas. If his dog's called Andy, I'll be surprised. Andrew Peace is in. Good evening, Andrew. Malifaux is steampunk. Well, we won't say it's fantasy, it's in between. That's kind of where my head's at, mate, as well. I'd like to see more kind of horror games, I think. That seems to be something that feels like it's missing a little bit. I'm surprised we don't see more of that kind of horror genre. I mean, certainly survival horror games in video games is a big part of it. I'm surprised we haven't managed to kind of capture that a little bit on the tabletop. Let's have a look. Skullmunch is saying, what happens if you fantasize about it each and every day? I guess it becomes fantasy then, doesn't it? Phil saying, you got the first two letters right, to be honest. Love the stream. So if it's not Rove, then it must be... Is it Roger? Is it... What else could it... No, I've got no idea. Animus is saying to Christian there, weird and steampunk is the right description of Malifaux. I love Malifaux. And I'm definitely going to check out 3rd edition, I think, as well. I saw that the new stuff's starting to ship now. But yeah, it's that kind of Victorian horror, steampunk, weird west. The background to Malifaux was always fantastic, and it was one of the things that dragged me in, even though I'm not a big kind of lore, kind of story-driven person. But when I got into Malifaux, it was literally brand new. I think it had only been out a matter of weeks when I picked up that 1st edition rulebook. And it felt nice getting in on the ground floor. Like I wasn't trying to play catch up with these people that had been playing it for sort of 10 years and stuff. And it's quite nice to get involved in a new game like that. Skullmunch is saying, new live chat game, name all the games that don't quite fit in the categories. Mark was saying there are plenty of horror games. See Nemesis, Deep Madness, Bloodborne. They're more board games, though. I'm surprised we don't see more from a tabletop, like a miniatures game. Rather than actually board gaming. Paul said, anyone know much about this new Jaws game? Just that I've seen it, mate. Just that I've seen it. Phil says, I'm naming my next dog Andy. And Douglas is saying lots of zombie games. It's weird. I know zombies are part of horror stuff, but I think I've been ingrained to see zombies now as more like almost comedy. Like even The Walking Dead, I don't think of as horror. It's, I think Shaun of the Dead kind of like made me think of zombies in a very different light. Roger the dog just sounds dodgy. I don't know, mate. Mark saying to Paul, he's watched a few gameplays. I'm assuming this is for the Jaws game. Paul saying Strange Aeons is a great horror genre game. It's published by Uncle Mike Worldwide. Warband style combat in Lovecraftian universe. I'll have to check it out. I've never heard of that one. And George is saying, I think the reason survival horror doesn't translate is the goal is survive. There's no discovery element or questioning or adventure. Yeah, you're probably right, really, why it's never come across. we chatted a long time ago on a live stream about I'm sure you could make like some kind of game where a bit like Friday the 13th, where you're trying to kind of escape from Jason or something like that. That would be quite interesting. Douglas is saying, so is Warcry a board game? No, I see Warcry definitely as a miniatures game, like a war game. For all it's played on a board, and I know you get the board in the box, it's the fact that it's customizable. You can pick and choose your war bands, I assume, and the fact that it keeps expanding, and there's multiple different factions to choose from. I see board games as very much kind of self-contained, like everything is in that box and that's all you need. Expansions might come down the line, but they basically just build on variations of the core rule, if you like. So I see it as a miniatures game personally. Skullmunch is saying that Malifaux 3rd edition's been doing well. We'd have said they're all sold out and are working on a second printing. That's good news, because the problem with that was, and we're getting off the fantasy topic a bit now, the problem was they announced it way too early, and I think a lot of people almost gave up on it and said, I'm not buying anything more until 3rd edition comes out, just in case it's underpowered or unvalidated or it's different enough or whatever it is. So I think they didn't do themselves any favours by announcing that as early as they did. So I'm glad it's doing well. Paul is saying, is that the release date? Need to check out some vids. Yeah. Yeah, it's a mini game, but it's played in a board. I think I don't class the boards as boards as in board game. It could just as well be a mat. You know, it could be a neoprene mat or something like that. But I think it's more just the fact it's on a fixed size. I think that's the thing. Where we are, 12 Neef is in as well. It says, sorry I'm late, work and all. Never apologise, 12 Neef. Always good to have you in, buddy. Steve says, Andy into the last 15 minutes to vote. Yep, so if anybody hasn't voted on the Facebook group for which faction Steve's going to play, I'm just going to have to try and head across here as well. See if I can pick it up in the chat. Let's see if I can find it while we're chatting away here. So let's see what else we're saying. Phil says, will you dress as Conan for Halloween? I have never dressed up for Halloween. I've never even been to like a fancy dress party or anything like that. So not because I'm a spoil sport. I've just never had the opportunity. I'm just cycling through here. We've had quite a few votes in here now, Steve. To be fair, what's that? That's 19. That's 25. That's 34. 34. 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42. We've had 43 votes so far, mate. So yes, that'll be interesting to see how that goes. We've got Paul in as well. Good evening, Paul. He says, I usually consider steampunk to be a sub-genre of science fiction. It's occasionally referred to as Victorian sci-fi. What never is steam-powered or punk. Furious George says, Andy would make a great Uncle Fester. I don't know whether to take that as a compliment or not, buddy. Flying Mama says, right, that's the weekend. I'm bringing you a costume. Something tells me that your costumes would not fit me. I might get them on one leg. That'll be as close as I'll get, I think. But yeah, so fantasy. I'll get back to the subject while we're doing this. Fantasy it's just having a real resurgence at the moment. For all it is still kind of based very much in that orcs, goblins, dwarves, kind of undead, vampires. They're all kind of linked really along that same kind of thing. It's amazing that each company manages to put their own little spin on it, and they're different enough that they do appeal to a different gamer. Guess his hide for an official cup. How can you tell how tall I am from the video camera? I might have actually said it once before. I was just going to say, Marco, Uncle Fester, definitely not a compliment, mate. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, so fantasy-wise, I think Warcry is going to be interesting, because Warcry, for all it's based in AOS, they're very much the war bands we've seen so far don't feel very fantasy. They feel very kind of almost a bit like hate, I think, really. A bit like sort of more violent, if you like. Those war bands, with them being these chaos war bands, feel less fantasy. There's been no talk of kind of magic or anything yet, although there may well be magic in the game. There doesn't seem to be a lot of ranged weapons from looking at it. It's going to be interesting to see how that, where it fits in its little niche, and no doubt it'll sell well. Everybody will sell out of all their copies of Warcry because everybody wants it for the terrain. But I've backed the battle systems terrain for the fantasy one, so I know I've got a big chunk of fantasy terrain coming sort of early next year. And I'm thinking, do I really need to buy this just for the terrain? It's one of those horrible things, and I talked about it when I was saying about sort of the fear of missing out and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to just go and buy it and then never play it, but by the same stretch, I don't want to see everything kind of like all these battle reports and everything else, and then find out actually I really wish I'd bought it and it's sold out like the Kill Team box did. So I feel like I'm caught between a rock and a hard place a bit. Douglas, yeah, it was a Facebook question. We were voting on what Steve's army will be to face off against me at the weekend 2 in October. We're going to have a game of Kings of War, and there is you've got a choice between the forces of Basileia, orcs and salamanders. So it'll be interesting to see what the community has voted for. But it's quite close at the minute, to be honest. 2 of them are within sort of like 3 votes of each other. The other one's probably out the running now unless there's a late flurry, but it'll be interesting to see. Where are we at? We've got Blizzards in. Good evening, buddy. How are you doing? 5'7" 3/4. Very, very precise there. Let's have a look. Yeah, Douglas is saying Warcry looks dark, very dark. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And Phil saying the models look too cool. Cool too. I think they're an acquired taste. There's no sort of fantasy races. They're all very human-esque at the moment, which is interesting. But it's got a bit of like almost a Hellraiser feel about it. You know, like the kind of the Cenobites and stuff. Some of them, I think, is it the Unmasked, is it, or something, or Unmade? I think it is. They've got a weird sort of aesthetic to them. 12 Neef is saying he wasn't sold on the game until he saw the box contents. Animus is saying Rangers of Shadow is another skirmish fantasy game from Joseph. Yep, the guy from Frostgrave. Again, I think it's very much an RPG-esque type thing, but you can play solo, which is a big selling point. Blizzard's saying he wants some of the Warcry warbands and rules to port them into Kings of War Vanguard. That will be interesting. Just bring them across as kind of like one of those factions. Paul saying the quite slight look of Warcry does look really brutal, but that's part of the appeal. Kind of reminds me of the 80s Conan film. Yeah, it's got, I'm trying to remember now, there's an old sort of fantasy film which was a bit like kind of like gangs set in kind of out in the wastelands, and I forget what it's called now. The name's gone from my head, like probably like an old Rutger Hauer film or something like that. But yeah, it doesn't feel like AOS, that's for sure. Let's have a look. Where are we up to? Christian is saying, couldn't you use your Patreon funds to buy Warcry for the channel? It's what you have it for, right? It is, mate, yeah. And to be honest, I mean, I could do. I'm kind of torn as to whether it's the best use of the money at the moment. I probably will end up buying it, let's be honest. I probably end up getting it because it's one of those games where everything tells me I should like it, but there's just so many other things going on as well. I'm torn, mate. I think that's all it is. But if you guys want to see it on the channel, if there's enough of an audience for it, if you all kind of want my opinion and you want to see what I think of it, then it's probably worth kind of picking up, even just to give it an honest review. And then if it's not really for me, I can always kind of sell it on or whatever. Paul saying one of the warbands have dwarves and elves. If you look closely, must have missed that one, mate. Actually, Johnny saying, do you think Warcry starter set will sell out quick as the Kill Team one? I don't think the Kill Team one actually sold out that quick. I think it just sold well and it sold faster, I think, than they expected. But it wasn't like sold out in the pre-order window. It wasn't sold out like in the first week. You could still pick them up for a little while afterwards. And I would imagine they've learned from that, to be fair, and I would imagine they've made a lot more copies of it. And also, there's a 2-week pre-order window as well. So that'll be interesting. Joel is in as well. Good evening, Joel. He says, loving the look of Warcry, but can't justify yet another game that'll hardly get played. That's kind of where my head is in, mate, I'm going to be honest. Busey's saying, how do you rate Resident Evil 2 board game? Looks like you can play solo. You can play solo, mate, and I've also got a review of it on the channel. So if you want to check, if you want a kind of a bit more in-depth of what I think of it, check out the review. I've got kind of mixed feelings about it. The game itself is good. I like the miniatures, especially now Christian painted them for me because they look awesome. Some of the components, like the boards, are a bit disappointing. But yeah, if you check out the video review, you'll see a bit more detail, mate. Let's have a look. Skullmunch is saying, hold fire, Blackjack and Hori peeps. I'm at the AOS open day next weekend. I'll let you know how it is. Thanks, buddy. That's what we need. Feet on the ground. Tell us how it is. Douglas is saying, equipment, Andy. I must have missed Douglas. What was that about, mate? I must have missed that one. Paul saying, definitely want my opinion on it. Phil saying, plastic crack. Isn't it always? Mark saying, everything else will be shelved next March and April when Super Fantasy Brawl is out. Super Fantasy Brawl, another fantasy game that I forgot to mention, actually. Yeah. Yeah, I can't wait for that to ship, I'll be honest. 12 Nefa saying, there's no shame in being picky what you buy. I don't buy everything that comes out. Yeah, I don't buy everything either, to be fair. And I think in this case, I think it's a little bit different when I'm doing stuff for the YouTube channel and people are donating money to allow me to buy some of the things that I wouldn't normally buy with my own cash, really, as well. And if people want an opinion from me, then I'm not obliged to do it, of course, but like it adds weight to the should I, shouldn't I argument, if you like. Jackson as well says, hello, Andy, hello all. So fantasy, a good topic for me, as I've been playing a sort of homebrew AOS Path to Glory. Even played a scenario with floating rocks. Awesome, mate. That's just reminded me, actually. Did anybody see that the latest White Dwarf has a version of Shadespire, or rules to play Shadespire, with like 3 to 6 players, where you only play one character each? I might pick up that White Dwarf just to find out the rules for that game, because that could be a nice little fun, quick weekender type of game where you're only controlling one miniature. You can get a few people around the board. It'll be interesting to see how that plays. Paul saying the Iron Golems have a dwarf. I'll have to check them out a bit closer, mate. I've not really looked into detail in the miniatures, if I'm honest. Paul, he's also saying the Splintered Fang have got an elf in their ranks. Yeah, Jack's saying the same thing. Box looks good, waiting to see the rules in the game. Skullmunch says, I'll be representing the crew too with my BlackJack tee. I need to see some pictures of that, mate. I want to see the BlackJack Legacy t-shirt in Warhammer World. Droid Skull, good evening, Droid Skull. Thanks for joining the chat. Says, only way I'll play or buy Warcry is when they release a Goblin Warband. I think there's a few people probably thinking for stuff like that as well. Warcorgy's in as well. Good evening, Warcorgy. He said, just joining, but have we discussed Warlords of Erewhon by Rick? We really... we very briefly touched on it, mate. If you've got something about it, if you've played a lot of it, Tim mentioned he really enjoyed the game. Tell me what you love about it, mate. I've not played it yet. It's one of those games where it's kind of flew a little bit under the radar. There hasn't been a lot of hype about it. I've not seen a lot of stuff online about it. I'd love to know more. Tell me what you love about it if you have. George is saying, off topic, but I'm going overseas soon. What small size game would you recommend I take with me? Must be 2-player and fit in my backpack. Are you talking board game, mate? Card game? Miniatures game? If we're talking card games, you could do a lot worse than take a couple of decks of Keyforge. Nice and small, would pack in your backpack, no problem. If we're talking board games, what would I recommend? So a board game that's quite small. You could try something like Ticket to Ride New York or Ticket to Ride London, the new one. They would be good options, relatively small boxes. Miniature gaming, I think it'd be hard push me to get a miniature game in there. And certainly something that packs up nice and small. Oh, I've also just remembered as well, Joan of Arc, from a fantasy point of view, for all this kind of historical, there's dragons and monsters and stuff in it as well. Somebody just said fantasy needs more dragons, and when I saw a dragon, it reminded me. Jack saying that the Shadespire scenario sounds cool. Yeah, somebody had shared a clip of it on one of the WhatsApp groups I'm in, and it mentions about kind of 3 to 6 players with just 1 miniature each. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what that is actually. Matt's saying he's at Manic this weekend. I'll see you there, Matt. I'll be there as well. Johnny Jumbo just says bar. I must have missed something there. He says, oh, in honesty, GW should send you a copy of Warcry to review because let's face it, you show it in all its glory and we'll all buy it. We are nerd sheep. That's where the bar come from. I'm not on GW's radar, mate. I have heard on the grapevine that once you hit about 10,000 subscribers, if they feel that you kind of fit their model, if you like, then you can get in along on their kind of press list, if you like. So people like Winter's SEO, people like Guerrilla Miniature Games, people like Mini Wargaming, people like Wargamer Online, I think they get some Games Workshop stuff sent out early. I think I'm probably not their best market because I talk about too many other different bits and pieces, I think, for their tastes. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe one day. Warcorgi says it's a lovely skirmish-sized game that's miniature agnostic, so you can use whatever you have in your collection. And the game also well supported with 3 new army lists by the creator. Yeah, you might have missed that early on, but I said I'm always a bit funny about those miniature agnostic games because it kind of confuses me when you get that mixture of miniatures. I like to know exactly what everything is, but I think I'm in the minority on that, to be fair, though. Phil saying PS5 10. I think I'm like 5'9.5" or something like that. I think 5'9" 5'10", I think. There you go, mate. Skullman saying Gloomhaven is an awesome 2-player travel game. Yeah, maybe not. Let's have a look. Marco's talking about Tiny Epic Galaxies and Hive Pocket. Hive Pocket, I would definitely recommend after playing that at the expo with you lot. Mark said he's off to Thailand next week for a month, taking his BlackJack Legacy tee with me, along with Keyforge, Hive, and Super Fantasy Ball print and play. We need some Thailand pictures, mate, with the t-shirt on, that's for sure. Where we at? Steve says, right, it's 10 p.m, so it is, mate. So, let me just make sure I've refreshed this one to make sure it is, make sure I've got the latest numbers for it. Just refreshing now. So the choice, of course, it's running really slow now in the background, and it's lost where I was on the page. Let's find it. Bear with me, folks. I'll get there. Right. So the final results. We had 9, 10, 11. We had 12 votes for Salamanders. So Salamanders come into 3rd place. We had 20 votes for Orcs, but the winner with 22 votes is Forces of Basilia. So yes, so my Forces of the Abyss will be facing the Forces of Basilia in October. So yes, mate, I'm looking forward to it now. Now you know what your army is. I know what I'm up against. Good versus evil, eh? Let's see how that one goes. Nice one. Phil Wilkinson says, best soundtrack to Kill Miniatures too. Oh, I'm not sure. I've been watching a few music documentaries recently, and I watched a documentary about Motley Crue, which I quite enjoyed. So yeah, we'll see some Motley Crue stuff. Warcorgi saying, missed it, but get your point. Yeah, I think I'm probably in the minority in that, but I think what I said before was it's one less thing to think about, I think, when I just know instantly looking what everything is. And Phil saying, I win. I knew Google Earth and Telescope would come in handy. Different gear. I was calling you different gear there. Sorry, Busey. He says, Uno's a really good card game. You're not wrong, mate. My wife bought me it for Christmas. I'd never played Uno before, believe it or not. And it's one of them games that we just kind of like throw out every now and again now. Just kind of just pick it out when we just fancy a quick kind of game for a little while. So, yes. So in October, at the weekend, Steve and I will be facing off Kings of War, the Forces of the Abyss versus the Basileans. Interesting, eh? Interesting. Let me see here. I don't know whether my chat has frozen here or not. Let me just shrink that back in again. I think it's give up the ghost, to be honest. Or it's coming up with only the top chat rather than the live chat. Let me reset my chat here and we'll see how we go. Because for some reason, it just decided to freeze on me. There we go. That's better. Yeah, so I don't think I've had any chat for a few minutes now. I don't know whether it stopped. Is my stream still going? There we go. It's all right. It's back on again. I don't know whether I've missed something or not. Steve saying he'll get painting them. Look forward to the game and hopefully winning myself a mug. Yeah, we'll see how that goes, mate. We'll see how that goes. And Douglas is saying we need a video of that weekender. We might get on a live stream actually. Let's see if we've got good enough internet and stuff. We might even get that one on the live stream, mate. Yeah, Johnny's saying it seemed to freeze for me as well, mate. I wasn't sure what had happened there. George is saying Andy needs to put more money in the chat meter. Yes, I definitely do, mate. That's for sure. But yeah, I don't know what it was. There was just a bit of a gap where nothing seemed to happen. No messages coming through. Where are we at? Skullmunch is saying, do we think Call to Arms will have a good showing at the weekender? I'm not sure if Call to Arms will be played at the weekend or not, mate, because we originally announced Walking Dead All Out War because Call to Arms hadn't really been kind of finalised at the time. So we might change the Walking Dead, the All Out War kind of event to a Call to Arms one. I'm not sure, mate. We'll have to see how it kind of picks up, really, how popular it is. Mark's saying the stream's okay now. Lamb of God Carrie is saying, I've heard of Lamb of God, but I can't say I've ever heard any of the music. We've got Craig McCartney in. Good evening, Craig. He says he's got both Dungeon Saga and Star Saga. Despite Star Saga being an improved version of the same game, given the choice, most people I know would choose to play Dungeon Saga. I don't have Star Saga, and I have heard Star Saga is kind of improves upon Dungeon Saga. But there is something about that kind of dungeon aesthetic of fantasy games and trudging through the kind of the catacombs and coming through in the dungeons and fighting kind of fantastical beasts. There's something a bit more fun, I think, when it becomes fantasy. I think when it comes to that kind of stuff. I think the other side of it is it's when you get into sci-fi. There's always just this idea. Well, it's science fiction. They've got big laser guns. Like, surely that everything just evaporates when you hit them with the laser gun. Phil. Sorry, Christian is saying the Skullmunch, hope so, would like to give it a try. There's nothing stopping us doing some one-off games, mate. If there's not much of a kind of an event for it, we can certainly still have some one-off games. That's for sure. Certainly, we'll have enough kit there to be able to do it for the Walking Dead event anyway. Phil saying, how many orcs to change a light bulb? 1 to hold it and 200 to turn the house round. Is that what we've got to now? We've got orc jokes. Mark saying, wouldn't take anything away from Star Saga as a game, but do love Dungeon Saga. Yeah, like I say, I think there's just something about it from a fantasy perspective. So, what I'd say then is, what fantasy games do you lot play? What are you looking forward to coming out? Has anybody tried Conquest yet? Did anybody get a chance to demo it at the expo? Has anybody bought it? It's been kind of hovering around in the background, waiting for a release for quite some time. Is anybody interested in that? Are there any fantasy games that you play that I've not even mentioned tonight? Let me know in the chat if I've missed anything off. But yeah, I had a game of Walking Dead on Saturday night. Paul Welch, who you may know from kind of he's on the Walking Dead rules committee as well. He popped up at the weekend and we had a game that we played and filmed that will be coming up on the channel this week once I can get to edit it. And that was one of the scenarios from his Trial by Fire event, which is coming up not this weekend coming, but the weekend after. I think there's a couple of tickets left. It's at Element Games in Stockport. if you're fancying a Walking Dead all-out war event, there's definitely some awesome stuff. He's got, I think everybody is getting one of the Mantic terrain crates. Is it the Hunter's Pack, which has got like the tent and the campfire and the sleeping bag in. The really nice, if I can see if I can get my hands on them, excuse me. The really nice scenario books that he's had printed up as well, with all of the artwork in and stuff as well. He's done all of these himself as well, which look absolutely amazing, and they're exactly the same size as the Mantic ones as well, so they'll fit in your collection really, really nicely. He always does a good job of stuff like that, and you'll see that some of the terrain that he's been painting up as well for the event looks really nice. Steve's saying, yeah, dungeon crawl and rank and flank fantasy, skirmish for sci-fi, yeah. Paul saying he found Star Saga to be far too easy for the players compared to Dungeon Saga. I don't personally think the supposed improvements have had the desired effect. I've not played Star Saga, mate, so I can't really comment, but that's interesting. Paul saying, by the way, if you like horror, check out the Exorcist series on Amazon Prime. I've seen it, mate. It's awesome, isn't it? It's the one with Gina Davis in, isn't it? It's really, really good. Tim saying, the bit in the Lord of the Rings film confused me. How would an orc know what a menu is? Are you trying to say orcs are uncouth and they don't get to choose what food they want? Sean saying he's got a question for the solo Star Saga peeps. Do the AI minis get into cover and peek around corners to shoot, or are they stupid and run into the open? I have no idea, mate. Johnny saying he plays Sword and Sorcery. It's a board game by Ari's Games. Rules heavy but good solo if you've got a brain like a computer, or like me, a help sheet. Paul saying at the moment don't actually play any fantasy games, but really like the look of Warcry. Desperately want to like Kings of War because I'd love to do a Roman style Kings of Men army. Have you tried Kings of War, mate? Everybody I know who's tried it seemed to really like it. It's kind of relatively straightforward rules, and then it's like kind of the complexity comes in the tactics, if you like. I've pushed some bits of kind of cut out cardboard around to get my head around the rules, so I've not played it seriously or anything, but I'm looking forward to diving in. Flying Mammal is saying finally bought Moonstone at the Expo. It's unopened, so look forward to playing that soon. Moonstone. I don't know much about that. I've heard of it, but I don't know much about it. So is it something that you might want to bring to the weekender? Give it a whirl. Mark saying Zombicide, Black Plague, Dungeon Saga, but Hellboy is still on my table. How are you enjoying Hellboy, mate? Are you playing your way through the different case files? Christian saying don't play many miniature games outside of D&D, but the ones I'm interested in are Middle Earth, Vanguard, Frostgrave, and maybe Kings of War. Well, certainly plenty to get your head around, mate, there, and most of those, except Frostgrave, most of the other ones will be all available at the weekender as well, because Kings of War 3rd edition is released around the weekender, there'll be an opportunity to have a bit of a demo of that as well, so it's a good chance to give it a try, mate, if you're not wanting to jump in. Skullmunch is saying massive love for the Mage Knight board game. Not played that, mate, but I remember you telling me how much you liked it. Paul is saying he plays D&D, although if he's honest, I hate the D&D rules. Interesting, mate. Which version of D&D do you play? Do you prefer one of the older kind of 2nd edition or something, or do you play the latest ones? Paul saying I haven't seen season 2 yet. Oh, is there a season 2? I can't remember if I've seen season 2 or not. I'll have to check it out. I remember watching it with my wife. We really enjoyed it. Yeah, I'll have to check it. Phil says I want a fantasy version of Uno. Is it not just the same, but it's probably got like Roman numerals or something instead? Tim says Andy, Burrows and Badgers. Honestly, it's mint. To be honest, mate, when I saw it at the expo and I saw them miniatures, it did kind of bring a smile to my face, and it made me think, oh, actually, I could quite enjoy painting those things. George saying he hasn't played it yet, but looking forward to picking up Discworld game Thud. I didn't know there was a Discworld game, mate. Sean saying Moonstone was the small box I showed you at the meetup. Ah, that's right, I do remember it now. I remember hearing about it, but I've never actually seen it. But now you've mentioned it, I do remember that box now. Paul saying there's one rule that ruined it for me. It was just couldn't get over it. I hate the way units bounce off each other after melee. It's just silly. Really hope it's gone from version 3. It won't be gone, mate. It definitely won't be gone, because it's more of a kind of, it's just a game mechanic to streamline the game. It's so that after combat, it's really easy to kind of to see that you're not locked in with people. And it's to do with things like counter charges and stuff like that, and to be able to kind of pivot and do other stuff. So yeah, it'll not be gone, mate. I'm pretty certain it won't be gone. Busey there saying, I like the way Dungeon Saga comes in that book type box. Yeah, I don't know if you can see it. It's just slightly off to the side there behind me, but it's in the slipcover on there. Yeah, it's nice the way they've done that. Douglas is saying, my 16-year-old is bugging me for dinner. 6 p.m. here, so time to go. Cheers, gang. Thank you for coming in, buddy. I really do appreciate that, and I know it was it was dinner time for you lot. So thanks very much, mate. Take care. Flying Mama says, is anyone bringing badges and burrows? Get it in the Facebook group. Get it in the Weekender group and see if anybody's got it to bring it along. Flip Movie Maker says, Song of the Splintered Lands is older now, but a fun miniatures game, particularly if you like anthropomorphic animals. I've not heard of that one, mate. Phil says, do you have a favourite miniature? Oh, that's a bit of an open question, isn't it? Do I have a favourite miniature? Do you know what? I'll tell you what, my favourite miniature I've ever painted is one of the Beast Claw Raiders. I forget what they're called now. The Stonehorn, I think it was. Either the Stonehorn or the Thunder Tusk. There was just something about them models. They've been out for years, but they just look so nice, and I really enjoyed painting them. Actually, you can do some like really nice effects quite easily with the fur. There's loads of detail to it, and I like the way the tusks just have loads of detail to them. That's probably my favourite miniature I've painted. But have I got a favourite miniature in general? I don't know that I have, actually. I'll stick with that one, mate. I'll stick with that. Paul saying, we're on D&D 5th edition, but the issues I have with being playing part of D&D for as long as I can remember. That's just it then. And Ruth is saying their favourite mini is Bad Juju from Malifaux. Yeah, there's some nice Malifaux miniatures. I remember painting I'll see if I can dig it out and get a picture on the Facebook group, actually. But I painted the original... oh, my mind's going to fail me now. Yeah, I'll get a picture up. I'll remember and get a picture of it anyway. And Ruth's also saying the Dobby Harry Potter game. Nice one. Sean says, don't know if I have a favourite mini, but can just tell you if I do, it's not painted. That is a really good point. Yeah, so mine's now the dragon from Joan of Arc. Probably my favourite miniature. Can't even bring myself to stick them wings on and start painting it. Paul said, I don't know of any other game where units bounce off each other because it's a real battle. That's not what happens. Once you start fighting, you're in until you win, lose, or run away. There's no bounce. I'm trying to think. I have played other games where you basically you do separate after battle. There are games like that, but I must admit I can't think of them at the minute. But I've played one recently. What the hell was it? I'll have to find out more than me. I'll have to understand why it's there. It's obviously important for that particular game, but I can't remember why it's important. So yeah, there you go. I'm probably not the right one to ask. So yeah, we're kind of getting into the last sort of 10 minutes or something now. It's been a really lively chat tonight. Thank you very much, everybody that's come in. No idea how many people we've had in, but it has been lively, that's for sure. Greg saying, are people seeing that after the success of Escape the Dark Castle, Themeborn's next game is a sci-fi one, Escape the Dark Sector? Yes, I have seen that. Looks like it's pretty good. Steve's saying it's a game. It is a game, mate. Yeah, but is there a technical reason why the units kind of separate? Is it something to do with kind of why do they always keep that gap between them? I thought I knew, and now I'm thinking about it. I can't remember why it is. Marco is saying, I couldn't follow much on the Facebook group. What was the issue with the Harry Potter miniatures game? So, a while ago, Harry Potter miniatures game went on pre-order, and everybody who wanted it, it was quite expensive. Everybody that wanted it pre-ordered it. When it arrived, there were some quality issues. Now, some of those quality issues were with the miniatures, where they'd used a very brittle kind of resin, and there was a lot of snapped wands and snapped miniatures, and there was a sort of a bit of noise about that. Night Models did replace a lot of these for people that had them damaged, or replaced them all. So they kind of honoured that, but they replaced it with miniatures of the same quality, if you like. The other complaint people had was the actual tokens and the boards themselves and the cards were quite inferior cardboard. They were really thin, almost kind of paper thin, from what I understand on some of the things. So anyway, everybody had paid up front for these kind of things. They all came. People were generally disappointed with the quality of the game itself and the quality of the components. But by that point, that was it. That was the game. That was done. They shipped probably back end of last year, I think, August, September time. Then what's happened is Night Models have decided to up the quality of the resin of the miniatures. They've decided to up the quality of all of the boards and all of the cards and all of the tokens and call it a second edition. Now the problem is that all these people who really wanted the game and who allowed them to make it by funding it in advance through pre-orders are now left with this inferior sub-quality kind of copy of the game. And now the second edition one, which will then probably go into shops and be discounted and everything else, has exactly the same rules, but just has far better quality components. And the frustration, I think, for a lot of people was the fact that they haven't even had it a year yet. There's an admission from Night Models that the quality wasn't up to scratch, and so that they are basically redoing it all again. But there's been no discussion about kind of replacing poor quality components from the first edition. They've now since subsequently gone back and called it a reissue or a re-edition to try and get around it somehow, rather than calling it a second edition, because people were getting confused. Like, is it a different game? Have you changed the rules? It is purely cosmetic and quality of the components that's been upgraded. So a lot of people were kind of up in arms about that. So that was basically the story behind it, mate. It was just people had spent a lot of money on miniatures and on a game that really wasn't the greatest of quality, and Night Models are now basically making it better quality, but not really acknowledging the people that funded it in the first place. Tony saying there, I'll be airbrushing my dragon. No way do I have time to paint it by hand. Yes, 100%. Paul saying, do you know if Tanks of the Modern Age is any good? Starter set is cheap. Yeah, it is good, mate. The original Tanks, it's very, very similar game. Modern Age just has newer, kind of more modern tanks in it. Really cheap, but really fun game. It's quite a small scale tanks. I think the tanks from, what's the game? Flames of War, that scale of tank. But it's essentially kind of like a streamlined X-Wing with tanks. Really good for the price, mate. Carrie's saying, have to run. Good chat. Enjoyed it immensely. Thank you for dropping in, Carrie. Skullmunch says, I'm going to hand paint Smaug with a fine detail brush. I'll see you in about 10 years, mate, when you see how you're getting on. I must have missed that. Phil was saying, is it wrong to paint a Baden in black, the black in orange? Yeah, your model, mate, your colours, anything you want. Adam Eggers come in as well. Nice to see you, future boy. How are you doing? Just need to convince Ruth I need that miniature. Skullmunch took a long time to hit the send button on that comment. Ruth says, you could say we took the risk, but Night Models knew what they have done and they didn't replace many people's models. There was too many to replace. It was a total rip-off. And that's kind of, I think, why everybody was up in arms. There's nothing wrong with a company admitting that they found a better quality or a way to improve the quality. It's one thing improving the quality. It's another thing improving the quality because you're admitting that the stuff you sent out was pretty garbage. That's the difference. It's not like it's just an upgrade on an acceptable product. It's bringing it up to acceptable from what was subpar. Christian's right there as well. There's no law to painting models, just guidelines. You paint them any colour you want, mate. And anybody that says you've done it wrong is full of crap. You can paint anything you want. Marco says, I'm considering buying an airbrush. Any suggestions on the kit, including compressor and everything else? I've done a video about should I get an airbrush, and I think in that video I think there's a link to the kit that I bought. My recommendation would be buy a compressor with a tank. Don't spend a fortune, and you can get away with cheaper airbrushes if you get a decent quality cheap one. I was really lucky. The one I got was great, and I used it for a couple of years before I decided to upgrade. However, I know people who've bought cheap airbrushes and they've been garbage. So I've got a really cheap one that came with the airbrush, came with a compressor, and I've got a better quality one as well, a Harder and Steinbach one now. And to be fair, there's not a huge difference between them because the one I got was pretty decent. But you'll see differences between airbrushes. Compressors are pretty much all the same, mate. As long as you get one with a tank, otherwise it'll run all the time. What you want to do is you want to build up the pressure in the tank, and that'll keep you a constant pressure through the brush. Flying Mammal is saying, how much is Smaug now? Is it still about 200 or 300 quid or something like that? Busey saying, where did you get that shelving to store your games? It looks good. It's all IKEA, mate. I think it's called Kallax. They're pretty standard for board games. I think most people seem to have this particular one. And Mark saying, yeah, it's IKEA, called Kallax. Christian says, everyone's seen the 3D printed banana heads that someone made for Space Marines. No, I don't remember that, mate. I'm definitely not saying that. Yeah, Paul's saying £100 says it's IKEA. It 100% is IKEA, mate, yeah. Cool. So, I am absolutely roasting now if you can't tell from my shiny head. Oh, so folks, thank you so much for coming to the chat tonight. Again, apologies for last week. It's the first one I've missed in quite some time, so yeah, I won't make a habit of it, I promise. But yeah, thanks for coming in. Fantasy stuff. If anybody's watching this back, sort of like not on the live stream now, they're watching it back sort of when it's just up as a video, drop it down in the comments. Let me know that you've popped in to say hello. Let me know who you are, because it's now always nice to kind of, there's a lot of people who can't get in to watch it live. Let me know who you are. Let me know what fantasy games you're playing as well. Let me know if there's any fantasy games I've missed that I've not talked about tonight. It will be really, really good to kind of to get your perspective as well. Get you viewers who watch afterwards, get you involved in the videos as well. Phil said he got an airbrush for 165 quid and a £100 compressor, and I still can't prime a model after 8 months. Matt says, when learning airbrushing, learn cheap till you've learned to clean them properly, then upgrade. Yeah, cleaning them is super important. If the tip gets all kind of clogged up with what it takes a while to get the air pressure versus the viscosity of the paint right. And while you're messing about trying to learn that, you'll keep blocking up your airbrush. It takes a little while. But once you kind of nail it, you just blast through stuff. They really are useful, but it's like any tool and any skill. You've got to practice with them. You've got to put the time in. Glyn snuck in there as well. Says, had a good excuse, was playing a 4-player game of Blood Rage. Nice to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming in. Johnny says, I'm no soothsayer, but I foresee Andy doing a 10 Warcry rules people forget, and then my finger pressing go to check out expensive. If I pick up the box, mate, nailed on, I'll be doing one of them videos. They always do well. My Shadespire one did fantastic. My Kill Team one did fantastic. People just, they want some help with the rules, don't they? So now I've said that, everybody else will jump on the bandwagon and do it first anyway. So Flying Mammal saying night all, thanks for the natter. Thank you very much, Flying Mammal. Phil saying night, guys. Paul saying night all. Glyn saying hi, Munch and Ruth and Joel and Christian, and everybody is saying good night. So yeah, in that case, we'll call it there. Thank you everyone for coming in again, and I'll see you all in the next video. Thanks for watching.